I'm really proud of the part that Labour Link played in the Labour leadership campaign, and the part that we played in getting somebody new elected and somebody that wasn't from old New Labour. And you've got to remember what we put in place as well. I mean, at the last forum, we had the fantastic hustings. I thought they were absolutely wonderful. You know, most of you will have been there. But we went a stage further because we believe in democracy, and we put those hustings on our website so every member of the union could see what potential Labour leaders were saying at our conference. We didn't keep anything back from them. And if you remember, we did ask them many tough questions of the candidates. We did put them through their paces. We asked tough questions. We didn't always get answers, but we did ask the questions. And then we got the whinging. Do you remember the whinging from a number of people in Westminster? You know, how dare our National Committee make a recommendation on who our members should vote for? Well, I want to say from this platform, I was really proud of our National Committee. They had every right to make a recommendation within our union. They had the leadership of our Labour Link, and they did what they undertook, what we expected them to do. And but even then, every candidate had a one-page in the special magazine that we sent to every member where they could explain their policies. And I thought that was great. And the important thing is, it wasn't you or me that decided. It was our membership who decided who they were going to support. And they, like many thousands of individual trade union members, had had enough of New Labour, and they did decide that they would put their vote behind Ed Miliband. And we played a big part, and the Link played a big part in ensuring that we had a democratic election. And I think, I'm saying this now, even though it's a year on, because I think it shows one thing that our Labour Link does for the Labour Party and does for the Labour leadership, because we are rooted in the working lives of public service workers. And it's that view that we take into the Labour Party and keep them on their feet. And it's a vital link, and it keeps the party in touch with our members. In local elections up and down the country, we've been there for Labour. And in the local council by-elections in Norwich and Exeter, in the parliamentary by-elections in Oldham, Barnsley, in Scotland and Wales, and the council elections in May, it was UNISON people doing the work on the ground, trying to get Labour elected. We are there for Labour. And the point that I'm also making is that we expect Labour to be there for us as well. And I'll be quite open with you. The Labour leadership got it completely wrong, bringing in markets and the profit motive into our National Health Service and into other public services. And it got it wrong in failing to regulate the banking and financial sector. But now Labour is in opposition. And what we need is a Labour leadership to attack the coalition for what it is doing to our society and not defending past mistakes. And I think too often, in the leadership in the twilight zone of Westminster, people are still arguing battles that they had it right, when quite clearly they should be out there now campaigning for us, for our members, and for our public services, and being our voice in opposition.
I know that Dave had some issues about what I said in my Sunday Mirror article a few weeks ago, where I attacked George Osborne's, I believe, desperate attempt to provoke confrontation. If I remember rightly, Dave said to me, "When we want your advice, we'll ask for it." I rather got the impression he wasn't asking for my advice that day, didn't you? But I'm going to come to the issues of pensions in a minute, but I'm going to make a broader point. We aren't going to agree on every issue, but I sincerely hope that whether we have disagreements on issue here or issue there, over the coming months and years, this union, this leadership, and this and all of you as delegates, you will keep giving us as shadow cabinet members tough and clear advice whether we want to hear it or not as well. I think that's a very important role that you play. Let's be clear, if it wasn't for your campaigning, we'd never have had 3,500 children's centres. If it wasn't for your pressure and Dave's pressure to me at the Treasury, we'd never have made the progress we did on the two-tier workforce, on the NHS procurement model, which we negotiated together. And if you look tax credits, the minimum wage, the progress we made on rights for part-time and agency workers, new rights for parents and carers in the workplace, the fact was it was your advice, your campaigning, and our partnership based upon shared values which did reap real rewards for working people. Just look at what we did on free school meals, which was again a joint campaign with UNISON and the GMB through the Warwick process, which led to the progress we were making, now ripped up by the government. And it is also the case that on fair pay and progression for teaching assistants and school support staff, it was our discussions and your advice and pressure which meant we said we'll face up to having a proper negotiating body. If that's right for teachers, it should be right for everybody else who's working in schools as well. And again, that's been ripped up by the government. I also think, though, I've got to put my hands up. We as Labour leaders have to put our hands up. There were times when this union and you in this room, your leadership, called for us to act, and we didn't. We were too late, for example, addressing the housing shortage to unlock council house investment in new housing. That was a case you made. It was a case this government, the previous Labour government, didn't respond to quickly enough, and we were wrong about that. And that was your advice, which we should have heard. The same on agency workers. You were right as well to press you and partner unions, and we didn't act quickly enough on that as well. So I'm going to start by saying I think the strong and the challenging leadership we get from your General Secretary, Dave Prentice, is vital for the future of the Labour Party as well as for this trade union. And let me say something about public sector pensions. We all accepted at the end of the last decade, and that was the Labour government and the trade union movement, that as life expectancy was rising fast in the coming years, and also because of issues of funding, we did need reform, and we need reform across the piece. That's why we had legislated to raise, in a very steady and measured way, in 2026 and then 2036, and then in the following decade, the overall state retirement age to match that rise in people's living, their life expectancy. It's also why Alistair Darling, with Alan Johnson before him, negotiating with Unison and others, had negotiated changes both to some public sector schemes to change the rules on new entrants, but also the cap and share scheme to make sure that we properly could manage contributions in this next period. I know all of us in the leadership election, when this was announced, our eyebrows were raised when a former Labour pension secretary was then asked to do this commission for the government. But it is also the case that in that interim and then final report, two important things. Firstly, highlighting the fact that a move to career average from final salary pension could be a better and fairer way forward for many low-paid workers. Could be, depending upon how it is done. And secondly, him saying loud and clear, the idea, and Nick Clegg was the worst at doing this, the idea that you can say public sector pensions are gold-plated when the average pension is £6,000 and in local government £4,000 a year, that is wrong and unjust for the government to repeat those things.
My argument with the Labour Party at the moment is, and Ed Balls, I think, let the cat out of the bag yesterday when he said, it's horrible being in opposition. You know, we can't wait to get back into government. Well, to me, to get back into government, you've got to be a good opposition first. And that's what I think is the weakness. I think a lot of those politicians, after 13 years of being in Parliament, in government, see themselves as a government in waiting rather than an opposition. And they really need to start acting as an opposition to the coalition government. And voters have to know what we as a party stand for. And I think if you went out there and did a vox pop round Liverpool at the moment, I mean, you know, Liverpool Council aside, I'm talking about national politics. When I ask what the Labour Party stands for nationally, I think you'd probably find people hard-pressed to give you a straight answer on what they, or you know, knowledgeable answer on what the party now stands for. So, I mean, my answer is that we need to reconnect with our core voters.
President, Forum, Wendy Nichols moving motion 1, the future of our pensions. And I think we will all agree it's a pity that more people in this country didn't get the message about pensions before last year's election, because they're now getting that message and they're now pretty angry about that, the changes. They're really angry that this government is going to make them work longer, pay more and get less. They don't remember voting for that, and I'm sure none of us remember that either. And they don't understand why they're being made to pay, while the people who caused the financial crisis just carry on like before. This motion says it all. It explains that the CPI is a con. It's the Tories moving the goalposts, just like the last time when they broke the earnings link. As soon as they're back in, they do the same again. They must think we're stupid not to spot it when they say that the accrued rights are protected. Well, they're not, because the uprating has been cut. What kind of promises is that? Your pension is protected, except we're actually cutting it. At the same time, they're saying to thousands and thousands of women, and there will be some here today, hit by it, you're going to have to work longer. And there's a cost to that. For some women, over £10,000, and for 500,000 women, between £5,000 and £10,000. At the same time, of course, there's plenty of money for big pensions for people in the boardrooms. Last year, the TUC looked at pensions for 329 directors at the top 102 firms. Average annual pension, a cool £227,000. That's 26 times. That's 26 times the average occupational pension, which is £8,736. And when they say that final salary schemes have gone from the private sector, well, guess what? 54% of top directors are still in final salary schemes.
Good morning, Chair, President. Rena Wood, North West Region. The reason I've got up here today, I know we know what the issues are, but I just feel so frustrated at the way that we're vilified in the press. What I think's really interesting is the day of action a couple of weeks ago with the teaching trade unions and the civil service. If you get an opportunity, go on Guardian's webpage, because there was a really good article by Polly Tony Bean. What I thought was interesting was this. I expected the percentage of people, members of the public's attitude towards defending public sector pensions to be very negative. And interestingly enough, it wasn't. And the reason I'm here, what I think is, we were so successful when we had our industrial action a few years ago that we need to be strategic in our branches. Did you watch the One show a few weeks ago when they had that right-wing loser off The Apprentice? She interviewed local government workers from Gloucester. Now, branches were being phoned to say, have you got anyone that will speak to the press? But we have to be careful, because somebody spoke to a nurse. It turned out she was on full-time secondment, so she got vilified for that. My message here is this. When you go back, let's start looking at our ordinary members who truly represent the pensions, the average pensions that we're going to get. We need to give them confidence to make sure that at every opportunity, get them to help them to write a letter to put to your local paper, help them to lobby the councillors and their MPs. You know, we can do it. We're sitting here, we've been here 2 days, we've got all the teaching material, the resources, but we're preaching to ourselves. We know what the issues are. Some of our MPs get sick to death of seeing us, sick to death of hearing us. It's the ordinaries that count.